It's my great pleasure. I'm Patricia. I'm the Research Director for International Security at Chatham House, and it's my great pleasure to chair this meeting. It's going to be a packed meeting with expertise from our illustrious panel, and also I can see from everyone in the room. So what I want to do is waste no time. I want to get us straight into the presentations and then straight into the discussion. We're going to go in order of appearance on the agenda. So I first want to introduce Hannu Kyröläinen from Finland, who is the Deputy Facilitator of the Helsinki Conference that will be at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Finland. So Hannu, we're very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say about furthering the goal of a WMD-free zone in the Middle East.
Thank you, Patricia. Distinguished co-panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I'd first like to thank the organizers for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to share with you some thoughts about the current state of play in the preparations for the conference on the establishment of a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. The EU consortium's conferences have provided us all valuable fora for exchange of information and insights between the representatives of government, academia, think tanks, and civil society. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the European Union for its solid and continued support for the work of the facilitator and his team. I see many familiar faces in this room, so I thought I could spare you from repeating the historical background of the facilitator's mandate. Neither will I dwell on recent violent developments on the ground in the Middle East, as disconcerting as those developments are. In my remarks today, I shall rather concentrate briefly on our efforts, the efforts of the facilitator, Ambassador Laajava, and his team during the past year. In spite of the disappointment in the Middle East region on the postponement of the Helsinki conference in late 2012, states of the region have shown their willingness to continue preparations. This reassures us that the prospects for holding the conference remain real. Equally, the conveners of the conference, the United Nations Secretary General, the Russian Federation, United Kingdom, and the United States, have reaffirmed their commitment to convening the conference as soon as an agreement regarding its arrangements has been reached. A significant amount of work, preparatory work for the conference, has already been done. The main platform during the past 11 months has been informal gatherings of the facilitator and the conveners with the participation of the regional partners. 5 such informal consultations have been held in Switzerland since last October, 3 of them in Lyon, and the 2 last ones in Geneva, the latest in the end of June. During these past months, the facilitator and we in his team have also had frequent bilateral consultations with the states of the region. On the basis of the discussions in the latest informal meetings and other efforts of the facilitator and the conveners, I would like to make here three observations. My first observation is that the dialogue among the states of the region has more or less touched upon all the key elements of the arrangements of the Helsinki conference, and the dialogue has produced some progress towards the convening of the Helsinki conference. So there has been progress. My second observation is that there is a real prospect of holding the conference in the near future. The remaining key questions could be solved soon. My third observation, despite the dialogue engaged in and the progress made so far, what is needed is continuing determined consultation between the states of the region, their willingness to seek solutions acceptable to all, and the political will to pave the way for the Helsinki conference. In order to facilitate the necessary agreement, the conveners and the facilitator are prepared to arrange a further round of informal consultations in the coming weeks. I wish to conclude my introductory remarks by reminding of the tremendous potential at hand with the conference. Thus, we should focus on the opportunities offered by it, on the positive prospects opened by it. The conference project has the potential to transform into a vehicle enabling partners to initiate a gradual change in the region. That would also have implications to wider interests of international peace and stability. I thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to our discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Hannu. I'm now going to turn to our second speaker, who is Hassan Elbahtimy, who is a research associate at the Department of War Studies, King's College, London. Hassan.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Thank you, everybody, for coming. The idea of controlling the destructive potential of nuclear technology is almost as old as the development of nuclear technology itself. Even before the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, many of the scientists involved in the Manhattan Project were arguing that international control of atomic energy was essential. And indeed, the idea of nuclear weapons control in the Middle East has longer history than commonly acknowledged. Yet while internationally ideas on nuclear control with time gained traction and gave us the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, these ideas in the Middle East have regrettably not followed a similar trajectory. One can think of nuclear dynamics in the region as forming three distinct waves, each with its own particular dynamics and actors. In the 50s and 60s, nuclear competition between Egypt and Israel dominated. In the 80s and 90s, it was Iraq and Libya. Now it is the controversy surrounding Iran's nuclear ambitions, and in the background, an interest, albeit receding, in nuclear technology that started since 2006. But alongside these waves, proposals and ideas were being tabled and argued for at almost every single decade of the region's history, trying to influence this dynamic, but ultimately always standing short of producing a robust region-wide regime that many other regions in the world managed to achieve. Russians like to cite Soviet proposals that go back as early as 1958 that proposed a nuclear-free zone in the Near and Middle East. But the first detailed plan, I think, to propose a kind of regional arrangement premised on nuclear restraint came from a much overlooked initiative by Kennedy's administration in the early 1960s. That initiative took form by 1963 and left an impressive trail of documentation available in US archives. The initiative's goal was to reach, and I quote, an unobtrusive, reasonably simple arrangement in the Near East addressing nuclear weapons and surface-to-surface strategic missiles. We are much more familiar now with more recent history of zone proposals. Egyptian-Iranian initiative in 1974 is an important milestone and a direct precursor for current discussions. Since then, an annual resolution in support of such zone is tabled in the UN General Assembly, and in 1980, Israel supported the resolution, which was influential in bringing about Egypt's own ratification of the NPT in 1981. Another landmark event in this history is the expansion of the concept to a region-wide arrangement in 1990 that includes all classes of WMDs, including biological and chemical, in addition to nuclear. But also from the mid-90s, the zone has become a prominent feature of the global nuclear non-proliferation regime. With the indefinite extension of the NPT, a revamped regime emerged that puts more emphasis on disarmament, Middle East, and strengthened review process. The 1995 Middle East resolution, as you, I'm sure, have heard several times before, was part of a wider package that brought about the indefinite extension of the NPT. It calls upon states in the Middle East to take practical steps, but also calls upon other states, including specifically nuclear weapon states, to extend their cooperation to ensuring the early establishment of regional zone. The most recent incarnation of this drive is the promised 2012 conference on the zone that is yet to be held. In a sense, the idea of applying a form of nuclear arms control has roots that run deep in the region's history, but despite being long in gestation, the idea has achieved very modest progress. While currently all regional states at least formally announce their commitment in principle to the establishment of a zone, movement to make these public commitments translate into action on the ground, exploring the modalities, institutional arrangements, and basic zone parameters have been regrettably limited. For many Arab states, their adherence and compliance with the NPT only makes sense if the regime can provide them with assurances that they are not going to be nuclear targets. They are also driven to ensure that the regime would deliver what it promised, a truly universal system of regional governance applicable in the region. Arab frustration about the lack of progress is at clear display at almost all multilateral arms control diplomatic fora. For Israel, efforts by different regional states to acquire WMDs has undermined the credibility of global regimes. And while it's true that Gaddafi's Libya and Saddam's Iraq highlighted some of the challenges of the effective implementation of these regimes, continuing to be an outside actor will only serve to make proliferation easily justifiable and foster regional instability. While the global regimes are not perfect, they have continued to grow and are developing better and more sophisticated tools for detection of non-compliance. Moreover, a regional zone, while building on these regimes, can go a step further to develop additional tools more tuned to our region's realities and needs. In this context, it's important to highlight the importance of developing verification tools that can play an important role in the zone. Well, in the effective implementation of the zone and increasing transparency, and to provide assurances that suspect activities are impartially and effectively investigated and in a timely manner. This is one of the challenges that arms control community, whether officials or independent experts, will need to address now. It's important to remember that discussions about verification of a test ban treaty started by a group of scientific experts decades before the negotiations of the CTBT started, and provided important insights when verification was discussed during treaty negotiations. This is more important now as we're considering laying the groundwork for a conference that looks into the zone. Coming up with verification regime for a WMD-free zone presents some challenges that require to be addressed. For one, the proposed zone lumps together chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, and currently no single verification regime exists that links the three weapon systems together. This raises questions about linkages between the different categories and how a general compliance assessment can be made. The zone will also involve a disarmament verification component, which is comparatively less developed in a multilateral setting than verification of non-proliferation. But also another challenge would be creating modalities for regional states to engage in cooperative monitoring and on-site managed access. These are only but some of the challenges, but I would argue they are not insurmountable. And a much-needed systematic investigation of current multilateral regimes, models of regional cooperation in verifying other regional zones, and existing regional approaches to verification needs to be examined, and can go a long way in first identifying the gaps wherever they exist, but also adapt many of the available verification tools to suit the zone's objectives and regional specificities. And we have many examples, including the international experiences in verifying South Africa's disarmament that can be drawn on, but also the bilateral US-Russian arms reduction process as it moves from verifying disarmament through delivery vehicle verification to one more reliant on nuclear warhead dismantlement. The UK-Norway initiative is one example of how disarmament verification can be examined with the involvement of a non-nuclear weapon state while addressing proliferation concerns. Creative thinking is needed to adapt the model to the Middle East. While currently the Biological and Toxin Weapon Convention has no verification provisions, the ad hoc group of governmental experts established in the 90s to identify and examine potential verification measures from a scientific and technical standpoint produce valuable insights that can be called upon and adapted to verify the biological component of the zone. IAEA safeguards regime can be also called upon as a basis for regional nuclear verification system, and consideration can be given to supplementing the regime to include more emphasis on cooperative on-site verification, revisiting some of the criteria like significant quantities for fissile materials and boost timeliness of detection for non-compliance. But we also have a great repository of experience in the Egyptian-Israeli context to verify the troop deployments that started in 1974 and continues successfully to this day, and namely the Sinai disengagement agreements in 1974 and 1975, but also the Egyptian-Israeli peace agreement in 1979 and its protocol in 1980. Under the 74 separation of forces agreement, in 74 and in 75, two different agreements, both Israel and Egypt agreed to third-party verification by the UN through on-site inspections in zones under force limitation, and facilitated the use of the U.S. The use by the U.S. of high-altitude surveillance aircraft. But both countries also engaged in what can be described as cooperative national technical means verification, and both countries agreed to establish electronic signal surveillance stations to monitor fulfillment of their agreement. At one stage, agreed sensors in these stations covered an area that total 620 square kilometers. The signing of the peace treaty in 1979 took this step further by creating joint on-site inspection missions formed by Egyptian, Israeli, and third parties to areas controlled by the treaty. These mixed teams carry out their own count of military items controlled by the peace treaty, undergo a debrief, then produce a final consolidated report of the inspections. Through using cooperative on-site inspection, agreed surveillance stations, and aerial reconnaissance, Egypt and Israel, with the help of the US, one has to say, have managed to verify their troop deployments in a regime that is in force till today. And by that, I'll end my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Hassan, and particularly for looking at the ways in which cooperative observations and inspections have been ongoing in the region. It's a really good reminder. My final speaker on this panel is Mustafa Kibaroglu from Turkey, known to many of us here. He's newly appointed at the Department of Political Science and International Relations at MEF University in Turkey. Congratulations, Mustafa, and we look forward to what you have to say.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be a speaker in this panel because at least I secured a seat to sit. Seeing this crowd, it's very much thrilling. Well, thank you. I'm honored to be a panel speaker along with my esteemed colleagues, especially chaired by Patricia, not only a prominent scholar and researcher, but also a longtime friend. So it's a great pleasure. This subject is very dear to my heart because almost 20 years ago, back in 1995, when I was a research fellow at UNIDER, I did a 3-month research and produced a work which was annexed to the study published by UNIDER as a UNIDER research board, edited by Jan Pravis and James Leonard, titled A Zone Free of Weapons of Mass Destruction in the Middle East. And my work was on Euratom and ABAC experiences, from which I try to draw some conclusions and lessons for the Middle East nuclear weapon-free zone. Well, having studied the subject for the last almost 20 years and having seen all the discussions going on, when I was invited to this panel, I thought to myself as to what kind of different contribution I could make to this discussion, because unless several steps are really taken by the parties concerned, we can go on another 20, 40 years by repeating the same good old arguments. And I think all of the states concerned must adopt a principle which must be to make not only, trying to make tangible efforts to push the process forward, but to make an additional step forward, whatever it is. Each and every actor must at least adopt this principle. And in that respect, when we look at the situation, of course, Turkey, there is this subject is very well known to all of the experts here and in the field, that Turkey is surrounded by countries which have or used to have weapons of mass destruction and their delivery vehicles such as ballistic missiles, and therefore this subject has been in Turkey's primary interest. And Turkey always tries to find ways to stem further proliferation, but also to general assist international efforts to strengthen the WMD regimes. In the area of nuclear weapons, Turkey has long been a state party, signed the treaty in 1969 and ratified in 1980, has safeguards agreements in place since 1982, signed and ratified the additional protocol back in 2001, soon after it was open to signature. And Turkey also took its part in the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Initiative, NPDI, which is a new initiative. Similarly, in the area of chemical weapons, Turkey signed the Chemical Weapons Convention in January 1993, ratified in May, a little bit later after the deadline that was announced back then, May 1997. There was no serious discussion in the country with respect to whether or not Turkey should sign. There was a little bit of discussion in the parliament, but not something that could block the ratification. In the area of Biological Weapons Convention, Turkey is a state party to the Biological Weapons Convention since 1974. So, against this background, Turkish authorities believe that total elimination of these weapons under an effective verification regime is the only security guarantee for all the countries in the region and beyond. They also underline the fact that the idea of establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East has been on the agenda now for decades already, and that all countries in the region have officially subscribed to this objective. Therefore, they expressed their disappointment with the postponement of the 2012 conference and emphasized that failing to convene multilateral consultations of a preparatory nature should be an indication of the magnitude of the challenge before us. And to add to the bleak picture, Turkish authorities also expressed their fear that the lack of progress in the implementation of the decisions in relation to the Middle East region may have negative repercussions for the NPT review cycle. So they argue that a verifiable WMD-free zone would be the backbone of any viable future regional security regime in the Middle East, and that such an arrangement would also serve as an essential building block in the peace process by constructing confidence. These are all official views that I'm presenting. Then I will switch to my academic perspective because I have no official capacity, but I'm just presenting these views so as to lay the ground for the discussion. And therefore, they believe that it is time to open discussions at national and also regional levels on the pros and cons of existing WMD policies and on prospects for changing course in the Middle East. And furthermore, in view of the increasingly fragile security situation in the Middle East with negative implications beyond the region, Turkish authorities draw attention to the urgency of moving forward. This is the point that I would like to emphasize. This is something that I keep seeing in the Turkish official statements. And they emphasize that it's a collective responsibility to invest in developing a common regional understanding on the establishment of an effectively verifiable zone free of weapons of mass destruction and their means of delivery in the Middle East. So at this very point, referring to the principle that I mentioned earlier, which was that every single actor that is taking part in the equation, big or small, close or remote, must make at least an additional step forward from their current position so as to push the process forward. I would like to express my expectation from the Turkish authorities, officials, to make an additional step beyond issuing eloquent statements about the urgency of moving forward. And that step forward could be the withdrawal of the U.S. tactical nuclear weapons from the Turkish territory where they are stationed for over 50 years. I'm quite aware of the fact that Turkey is a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and there's this meeting going on in Wales today and tomorrow since 1952, 62 years already, and Turkey undertakes certain roles in the context of the nuclear strategy of the alliance. As a NATO member, Turkey has long been supportive of retaining U.S. nuclear weapons on its territory for various reasons, and also expected others to continue to deploy these weapons as part of the burden sharing and solidarity principle of the alliance. Even in the absence of an imminent nuclear threat to Turkey's security, the prevailing view among the Turkish authorities does not seem to have changed since the Cold War. There are specific reasons that explain why Turkish government officials and civilian and military bureaucrats want to retain U.S. nuclear weapons on Turkish soil. First and foremost, and I will not go and elaborate on this, Turks believe that the presence of U.S. nuclear weapons in Europe strengthens the U.S. commitment to the transatlantic security and contributes to the credibility of the extended deterrence, a very topical issue I'm quite aware of. That said, Turkish political and military authorities who occupy seats at the highest echelons of the state apparatus, such as the President, Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, Chief of General Staff, and as you can go at lower levels, have time and again emphasized the need to realize the creation of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East at an early date, when they are especially making references about the existing nuclear capabilities of Israel or about the significant achievements observed in the nuclear program of Iran. So no wonder creation of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East is a major and crucial objective with an impact extending far beyond tackling the threat of nuclear weapons proliferation in the region. Indeed, it will be a panacea for most of the security problems that exist in the region. It's good to see that Turkish authorities who have wholeheartedly supported this project all the way. I'm quite aware and quite happy to see that. However, for Turkish statements, official statements, to have any meaning at all, foreign security analysts, especially from the region, argue that Turkey will have to consider its own contribution to the project by freeing its own territory from nuclear weapons that belong to the United States. I believe there is a certain degree of rationality in this criticism coming from regional experts. As I have said and written many times, for Turkey to be consistent with its WMD-free zone rhetoric, the U.S. nuclear weapons that are stationed on Turkish soil for the last 50 years must be finally sent back. So when asked about this proposal, top Turkish politicians, as well as security and foreign policy officials, react to this criticism by reminding that Turkey is a member of NATO and it has responsibilities toward its allies, and therefore it should not be expected to make a unilateral decision about issues that may have repercussions for the nuclear strategy of the alliance. Even though such an explanation may make sense to a layman, it sounds more of an attempt to get away from further criticism by the informed people, because I may state a host of arguments besides the need for being consistent with official nuclear weapon-free zone rhetoric as to why sending back these weapons wouldn't cause any damage, neither to Turkey's security nor to the security of the allies or credibility of the nuclear strategy of the alliance, even in the face of the crisis situation experienced with Russia in Ukraine. So I would like to leave you with this, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you may have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mustafa. So I'm going to open up the floor now for points that people raise. We've had 3 excellent presentations, one telling us that progress is being made, one telling us that it can be done, and here's how, and one telling us that other states can make a serious contribution, particularly on the borders of the region.
Sure.
And given there's a NATO meeting currently in Wales, that's very interesting. But given what's going on the other side of the Turkish border, that's something to consider. So the question is, with these great presentations, why are we all so worried and concerned? Why is it not happening? This has been going on, as you say, Hassan, for decades. Why is it not happening? So I'm seeing a lot of hands coming up. Peter, I'm going to go to you first. If you don't mind standing up and introducing yourself and using the microphone. And I'd like to ask people to be very brief in their remarks. I don't mind that they're not questions, they can be comments, but please no long speeches. Thank you. And I know I can say that to you because it won't be.
I am a professional diplomat, but I don't subscribe to the traditional long speeches. Peter Savchuk from the OPCW. I think some of the questions, how you framed it, Patricia, is quite right. I mean, most people would look at a WMD-free zone as something that's extraordinarily difficult, never been done before, much less in a region that's known and continues to know so much conflict. There's no silver bullet as such. The question I ask is, rather than have necessarily such a comprehensive approach, whether it might be possible to start with the realm of the possible. We have a very unique treaty in the form of the CWC in terms of being negotiated at a very interesting moment in history, at the end of the Cold War. The first treaty we have, which is such a comprehensive regime, one that's holistic and has very strong verification provisions. Even more importantly, it's been put through the hoops with the Syria mission, directly obviously in a country of interest in relation to this particular project. So I suppose the question I ask is, would it be helpful for this process to start off with a holistic regime in relation to one type of weapon of mass destruction, run through all the features of verification, that we're trying to tailor-made in a WMD context. Industry inspections, managed access to sensitive sites, confidentiality provisions, transparency of transfer, supply side and demand side. Have a go at that, and then see what can be done to extend the reach of our ambition. So in short, I suppose what I'm asking is, would it not be more practical to start with an effective proven verification regime in relation to one type of weapons mass destruction, and on that basis, author a tailor-made verification regime?
Thank you. Jonathan Hicks.
Thank you. I'm Erwin Heckel, German Council on Foreign Relations. Before entering into substantive questions, I wonder if I could put a very simple question beforehand, which is probably best addressed to Mr. Kyröläinen, because he was cautiously optimistic about convening such a conference. I wonder what is the region of the Middle East that's being going to be convened. Where does it begin? Where does it end? In the East, does it include Iran, Afghanistan? In the South, does it include Sudan and South Sudan? In the West, does it include the whole Maghreb, including Morocco or Western Sahara or Mauritania? And then if you have the states at hand, what about those states that do not have a functioning government, such as Afghanistan, Somalia, thank you, Libya, Syria, and what about outside participants such as nuclear weapon countries? If you have if you include the recognized 5 nuclear weapon countries, what about neighbor nuclear countries such as Pakistan? Would that be included? Thank you.
Thank you. Maurizio, please.
Excellent panel. My comment and question is Dr.
Do you want to stand up, Maurizio? That would be really
sorry,
helpful.
Dr. Hassan. You know I'm old, so I appreciate it very much. Indeed, last year in Rome I presented to the facilitator a simple piece of paper elaborated with Mahmoud Nasreddin, the former scientific and technological advisor of the League of Arab States. And our idea is to establish a monitoring, a verification, inspection mechanism in Middle East. So to start from it, based on the experience of Euratom, ABAC, Argentina, Brazil, and to start in graduation way. So not pose a sensitive question. Let's try to have a model for the non-proliferation in CBRN. So start to monitoring and verification, inspection, this kind of items, transfer of technology. So the question to you is why not start from, let's say, a scientific and technological community to study seriously this kind of mechanism, and then to move on the political question. I fully agree with my colleague here. The political dimension is how large must be the Middle East and which kind of intrusiveness it's possible to do. So this obvious idea for scientists, I'm a scientist, doesn't fly. That is the question.
Thank you. One last question before I go back to the speakers, and that's from Bernd Kubik.
Thank you very much. I'm also German.
Could you introduce yourself, Bernd, so that everyone? Thank you.
Thanks. I'm also German, Bernd Kubik from Frankfurt, northern Germany, which is closer to Finland than Mr. Heckel is, I guess. And I would like to build on your cautious optimism, Mr. Kyröläinen,
Could you
by
put the
asking
microphone
especially you 3 questions. The first one is, I think everyone in this room has admired the Egyptian capacity in reaching this mandate in May 2010. as now time is running out, because the mandate will be closed next spring and the NPT review conference is coming around the corner, my question is, when oriented as the Egyptians are, do you see this kind of constructive and energetic position on the part of the Egyptians right now when you say there is some progress? In other words, do you see the Egyptians stretching out their hands to the Israelis, which is, I think, the major challenge? The second question is, especially to you, Ambassador, despite or maybe because of the East-West crisis, do you see on the part of the major conveners a transfer of the focused, constructive bilateralism that we have experienced in Syria transferred to the current situation, which could mean on the parts of the United States some charming arm twisting with respect to Israel to come to Helsinki, and with respect to Russia to do the same on the Arab side? And my third question is, how could a Helsinki conference, let's say one day when it's cold, one-day conference in a closed room look like? Could you imagine that the current situation, which would include Israel, to agree to take stock first, to agree to disagree on the issues, and also to agree to further continue the process? Could these be three elements that is face-saving for the Egyptians, the Arab states, for the Israelis to bring them in, and for you as the relentless and facilitators to find a face-saving and forward-looking constructive approach? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'm now going to return to our three speakers. I'm going to go to Hassan first to give Hannu a little bit of time to think about how to respond to that, and then to Mustafa.
Right, sure. So the question about whether it is possible to go for an implementation of a holistic regime in one single category of weapons rather than, and then work it out from there into a zone concept rather than the other way around. Well, I think if you pose that question to a lot of officials, mainly from Egypt, they will tell you, well, this is actually taking place. We have the NPT, we have the safeguards regime that is around for some time. It's been implemented. We did our job by being part of that regime. But where did it lead us to? So whether there is merit of delinking, I think practically would seem possible. Would seem quite difficult to delink all these different categories of weapon. And I'm not sure exactly also how delinking would serve the purpose of the region. I mean, there is the impression that the more you give, that there is less reluctance to achieve progress on the nuclear field. And one of the negotiating cards, I would say, is maintaining some leverage when it comes to other weapons categories like chemical and biological that can be used to leverage political pressure on the nuclear fields. So I understand how that can be viewed with some skepticism from Arab countries.
To answer every question.
Yeah. On the question of scientific exchanges, yes, I mean, obviously this is a very good idea. And there is a lot of merit in following it. I think one of the problems about the zone, since the idea has been around for such a long time, there's a lot of skepticism in the region about the sincerity of efforts to go along and move forward with it. So I think in order to have something like this, what we probably need is something that gives a degree of consensus or agreement about the objectives that would allow smaller incremental steps, including scientific technical experts meeting, but with the support of a bigger umbrella that sets out the objectives and the agreements on the main picture of what's going on. I think this formula would give confidence that the process can yield some outcomes. Yeah, and I think that's it for me.
Very briefly, actually, there was no direct question asked me in this round, but on the issue of where the Middle East is, well, this is something that has been debated not only in this particular field of non-proliferation, but also in almost every other domain in the political science, international relations. Where is the Middle East? And of course, there's this general perception about where the Middle East is, and it covers a number of countries, Egypt, of course, Iran, of course, and this is sort of a west and east sort of borders for a concise study, for an in-depth research, but you can expand the region as far as you like, because there's always this correlation with other countries and with all the other developments taking place. One of the official statements about which region could be or should be called Middle East, you have to look at the IAEA documents, especially with respect to the nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East study, back in the UN General Assembly resolutions and references to IAEA documents since the 1980s. On the issue of having or not progress, actually, I don't think we have the luxury of not having any progress. That's why I emphasize in my short presentation that every country should commit to making at least an additional step forward, because everybody puts the blame on the other. Everybody point at some difficulties that all of us know. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, under the sky. So, therefore, unless everybody adopts this principle, big or small, maybe an incremental step, something, but that will push others or somehow give the impression that we can achieve something. Otherwise, we'll keep on iterating the very same old arguments. Well, Turkey, again, it's not considered in the Middle East in official discussions. Turkey is a NATO member, no wonder. But Turkey has not been involved in the Middle Eastern affairs as much as it has since the coming of the AKP, the Justice and Development Party, to power back in 2002. And we have become more of a Middle Eastern country than we used to be as some sort of Western country. That's why I emphasize the fact that while on the one hand, you are a NATO country and you pretend as if you have no connection with the Middle East and this is your problem, solve it all by yourself, and on the other hand, get involved in every single big or small issues in the Middle East. That's why the two issues can be connected, and that's, I believe, the time for the Turkish officials to think about the proposal that I just made here and in some of my publications before.
Thank you, Mustafa. Hannu.
Thank you. Let me put the question concerning so-called low-hanging fruits and monitoring verification aspects into one. Certainly, those issues are very relevant for the establishment of the zone. No doubt about that. Now, what we are at the moment dealing with is the convening of the conference on the establishment of the zone. So, in a way, even though those issues are relevant, they are not as crucial for the convening of the conference and creating the conditions for the convening. The question about the geographical coverage was actually answered by Mustafa. Thank you for that. And concerning the activities of the facilitator and his contacts with the countries, starting from Mauritania in the west to Iran in the east, and from South Yemen and others to the Turkish border. We, in the course of these more than 2 years, certainly have had contacts with the representatives of all countries, with some more than with others. And so I believe the coverage in a way or another has been there and will be also in the future. I certainly would not like to comment the role and position of the Egyptian government. That is not for the facilitator. What I can say about the East-West context, as Professor Kubik said, what I can say is that the facilitator has enjoyed a solid support of all the conveners. Then lastly, the question, how would the Helsinki conference look like? Well, I certainly have my thoughts about that. But in the end, it's up to the states of the region to figure out what will be on the agenda and how the modalities of the conference will finally look like. So I don't see it very useful to tell you the fruits of my imagination of the 1 day or 2 day conference in Helsinki. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we could please, over here, microphone. Where's the microphone's gone? Wait for the microphone. I don't know what's happened to our... Thank you.
In the past, there has been disagreements on 2 grounds, at least, when talking about this nuclear weapon-free zone. One has been what comes first, whether it's the peace treaty first or whether it's nuclear weapons first. And my first question is, does this play a role, or have you resolved the issue? The second question is about verification. I think there has also been difficulties in agreeing who is to verify. And I was interested to hear that Egypt and Israel actually have had a common verification process in the past. So is this a discussion that has been also going on? And finally, if the conference is not taking place before the NPT, what will be the consequences? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a gentleman at the back with... Thank you.
Hi, my name is Farzan Sabed from the Graduate Institute of International Studies. Just a general question. How do you see potentially the success or failure of the Iran nuclear negotiations impacting the prospects for the WMD-free zone?
Thank you. Just here, please. Thank you. I don't know what's happened to the person with the microphone. Do you?
Hello.
I've got you down.
My name is Keyhan Barziger. I'm an academic based in Tehran. I would like to know about the role of increased intrastate conflict in the region on the process of a zone. It seems that this process is on its weakest point because it reduces any pressure on Israel, because there are a lot of intrastate that are coming from geopolitical rivalry of regional states, like between Iran, Turkey, and Syria, and IS, between Iran, Saudi Arabia. Therefore, I think that there should be some kind of intrastate cooperation first and then going in that direction. So my point is that if the panelists can explain how these two can be connected.
Can I just get some clarity there? When you say there should be some interstate cooperation first, what sort of interstate cooperation do you mean?
I think because of these new intrastates conflict that is coming from, the rivalry between states, there should be some kind of regional cooperation between states first, and then going, because it's a political matter anyway.
Security dialogue in the region.
Security, political dialogue, and then going in that direction.
That's interesting, because that's the other side of this question that was just asked to your right, as to, it's the chicken and the egg, peace versus disarmament, which is exactly the same issue. I'm going to turn to Mahmoud Karem, who I have down, whether he likes it or not, to speak.
Patricia used her magic wand on me. I did not intend to speak. In 1980s, I was working in the mission in New York and later on doing my PhD. And there was a war in the United States at the time. This was the war of the hamburgers between several hamburger selling shops. And I remember this commercial on one of the televisions when an old, stern lady came to order her hamburger, and when she received it, she said, "Where is the meat?" Hannu, I do not mean any disrespect, but having listened to the 3 points that you have mentioned, specifically on the good results from your position, from your point of view, on a good dialogue that has happened, on the informal consultations that has resulted. And I must add, actually, something you should have said, but we say it all the time, the excellent role that is played by Finland and played by the facilitator in this regard. Unfortunately, the issue is too difficult. The complexities of the region have also reflected on your mission. But in all honesty, I don't think that any of us is happy with where we are now. To juxtapose these 3 points that you have mentioned and the achievements, quote unquote, as you have mentioned, to an agreement that we had in 2010, in the view of some, is really nothing to be proud of. And it will become even more difficult in the days to come because there will be a report to the 2015 conference on what has been accomplished. And if we say to the parties of the NPT in 2015 that given what we have been asked to do, given a role for the IAEA, which never happened, given the role for the Chemicals Weapons Treaty Organization to produce papers and studies, given a specific role for the Secretary General of the United Nations to perform, and what we have achieved is an informal dialogue, I'm not really sure that this will really augur well. And again, the analogy will come, where is the meat? Thank you.
Mahmoud, I'm going to push you. What would you do in their position?
That's another question.
Can you give it an answer for me?
That was a diplomatic answer.
No, don't give him any help. As an academic? Okay, I'll give you some time to think about it. How about that? That's great.
Get away with it.
No. Tariq.
Thank you very much, Tariq Rauf from CIPRI. I had a couple of questions for Ambassador Kyröläinen, and that is in connection with what some other outside players might be able to do to help the facilitator. The 2010 NPT Review Conference gave the mandate to the UN Secretary General to convene the conference and to appoint the facilitator. So do you think between now and the 2015 Review Conference there is some role for the Secretary General perhaps to be more active, to give some speeches, or to undertake or to invite countries, representatives of the countries, to meet him on this issue in New York or somewhere else to press the importance of him delivering on his mandate? And the second is in connection to the IAEA. All key countries relevant to the Middle East zone are present at the IAEA. They know the IAEA. Even Israel has IAEA inspections at a research reactor. And for 10 years, I dealt with this Middle East issue at the agency on the forum. And such a forum was held in 2011, but unfortunately there was no outcome from that forum. But there can be valuable work done there in terms of devising some verification modalities, cooperation in peaceful uses, trust building, and so on. So that was the second part. And finally, the third is there's also this issue of regional security, conventional weapons, and confidence-building measures, which seem to go beyond the mandate of the 1995 resolution. So how do you propose squaring the circle here? Because at least one party to this discussion would like to bring these issues to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to turn to Angela Kane to react to some of that.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Is it on? And thank you very much, Tariq, who's always asking the difficult questions, but I'm not going to handle all of the questions. I'm going to leave that up to Hannu. But I do want to say something about the United Nations and the role of the Secretary General. You rightly stated that he was asked to select the facilitator. I think he made a very good choice. And so the facilitators carried that forward. But the Secretary General is a co-convener, and he intends to take, and he does take that role very, very seriously. You mentioned, was he convening meetings? And I can tell you just about a month ago, he asked the 3 co-sponsors for a small, intimate meeting, if I can call it that, to basically tell them that progress needed to be made and what he thought the progress should be. So this is something that he also raises not only in New York, but he also raised it with his travels. I know that he was fairly recently in Egypt. I know that this was a subject of discussion. I know that this is being raised with him in a number of meetings, but he's very proactive in raising it. So that is basically something we do. Now, we do have a problem, and that is that one of the difference in opinion between the Arab states and other states is that Arab states would like to see the United Nations play a much higher profile role. That is rejected. We are basically ready to play whatever role we are being offered or we're being given, and we have been very active. I mean, I myself have attended nearly all of the meetings that have been held, which has been very time-consuming, so we've engaged very strongly. But there is one country, Israel, that does not see that the UN having a sponsorship role, so to say, and this is something where the facilitator is the one who is organizing it. It is going to be a, quote, Helsinki conference, but we still are grappling with sometimes squaring the circle in that respect. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you. I know you're not, but I'm just explaining it because there's a difference in opinion in terms of how this should be handled, and that's basically you get the little, that's where the rubber hits the road. I give it to the next speaker, whoever would like.
Speakers up on the panel, so Mark will have it. I'm going to turn now to Hannu to try to address some of those points. And can I have just a show of hands of who else wants to speak from the floor? I know here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'll go back for another round. That would be great. Thank you. So, and can I please ask everyone to be brief? Hannu.
Thank you. First. I would like to thank Angela again for clarifying the role of the UN Secretary General. Thank you. On behalf of the facilitator, I can say that there is a frequent close contact between him and the UN Secretary General, and of course we enjoy his full support. Now. The discussions on the between the states of the region on the agenda of the Helsinki conference, they touch upon the issue of disarmament and security concerns. So that is part of the agenda discussions. And here, like in other respects. It is the role of the state of the region to agree on the agenda, modalities, and other arrangements for the conference, and the facilitator cannot do the job on their behalf. We can certainly help them, but it cannot be dictated by the facilitator. The question about the influence of a possible deal on P5+1 negotiations, I think the facilitator and all involved in these informal discussions would welcome good news from the region. Whatever they are, so maybe that's what I would like to say about that particular issue. Let me see. Maybe I had forgotten something. Madam Chair, is there something burning I haven't responded to yet? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Mustafa next.
A very quick remark about what would happen if there is no conference before the NPT 2015 or what if Iran negotiations do not take us anywhere? Well, it's all about perceptions, and many countries are now frustrated with what is happening. I mean, not even, as I just try to emphasize during my remarks, even if we cannot get to talk at an informal or preparatory conference. Well, I don't want to undermine the importance, significance of the conference, but even if we cannot get there, how can we get even further? And after all, we categorize the NPT review conferences with respect to being successful or not successful, regarding as to whether we have a final document or not. And we all know how difficult it is to get the final document, and sometimes until the very last moment, nothing is certain. And I believe not having achieved even convening a conference will have negative repercussions, implications for the success of the forthcoming conference in 2015. That's why, I mean, it is very important. And those who look at this, who attach some importance to the NPT and are staunch supporters of the NPT, countries like Turkey, for instance, when I talk with the diplomats, I see this frustration that I just mentioned in their eyes and in their words, and that's why I just made some quotations from them. So that's why it's important. And back in October 2012, only a few months away from the conference that most people were expecting to be convened, I was in Moscow, staying together with U.S., Russian, and Iranian officials, and in the panel, all of us, and Israeli as well, all of us were quite hopeful that this time we're going to have it. But something happened on the road, some political developments in Gaza, and Israeli policies, Iran's reactions to it, and then nothing comes out of the very dear efforts of the diplomats and officials. So it is therefore something that we should, all of us, pay much more respect. I mean, other than seeing it as an important achievement, we must respect this process.
Hassan.
Yeah. Well, a few quick comments. The verification or the monitoring arrangements between Egypt and Israel are actually in place as we speak. So they started in the 70s. But they are actually part of how both countries go about verifying their commitments under the Peace Accord in 1979. So they're actually in place right now. The question about peace and arms control and whether which one should come first. I think it's a debate that has taken like so much of our time. Really, I think can't we just all agree that they can both go hand in hand? Well, there are no arms control without peace, but it's also not going to be any substantive, comprehensive, enduring peace without some levels of arms regulation. Quickly on the point of international organizations, yes, I think there is a huge role for international organizations to play, as you said, in terms of developing modalities, concepts, providing ideas as a forum to get states together. But I think also crucially, in terms of human development and human capacity development, because I think in the region verification capacities are not optimum to undertake a role that would be given to regional states if they go forward on the zone. Yeah.
Thank you. Right, I caught some of the hands, so if I could have the gentleman in the front row, please. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Jonter. I'm Professor of International Relations, Stockholm University. I'm not a diplomat, but I'm a Swede, and Sweden has been very much involved in disarmament efforts in the history. And there's one thing that struck me when I listened to all the presentations here. I think it's one missing piece here. I think if you look into the former previous nuclear weapons-free zones ideas during the 1950s and 1960s, they run into nothing for a number of reasons. But one important reason was that with a nuclear weapon-free zone, if it's going to be realized, would have a certain impact on conventional forces. that was the reason why United States were very skeptical when the Russians came up with the idea in 1958. And also, don't forget the Rapaki proposal in the end of 1950s. And Sweden actually presented a proposal in 1961 to set up nuclear weapons-free zones all over the world. Also, that plan ran into nothing because of that would have detrimental effects on the power balance, and because of the conventional forces has to be included in the equation as well to be successful. I understand you can never start with bringing in nuclear conventional forces when you sit down at the negotiation table, but it has to be somehow included in the background analysis, because especially if we have a nuclear weapon states included, and we have that in Middle East when we have Israel, certain cost on the Israeli side to enter in real terms to discuss and negotiate in good faith, I believe.
I saw Abe-san and Christopher and Elena. Great. Thank you. And
thank you. Nobuyasu Abe from Japan. As I heard the presentations and I heard how the informal consultations are going, I get an impression that people and the countries are sort of circling around the entry points, trying to avoid going into the real hard issues. And as I see it, the question is basically how to make Israel give up nuclear weapons, because that's the only country that have nuclear weapons in the region. And this is very difficult because you talked about many free zones. So far, the free zones are zones that confirmed countries that do not have nuclear weapons. This is the Middle East, the first case where you establish a region where you make one country which has weapons already give up. Otherwise, you cannot achieve the goal. So this is very difficult. So in that sense, Israel's apparently is arguing, unless you achieve a peace, you can't really talk about the free zone. But that is almost impossible proposition. If you wait for peace, you may never be able to have a situation. But in the meantime, as I heard, other countries are pressing Israel to sign up to the NPT in the meantime. But if you can't make Israel sign up to the NPT, you don't need to have a free zone, because Israel will have to give up nuclear weapons. So I think that is the end goal, end results of the conference. So I think, in a way, you need to have some kind of modus vivendi, provisional agreement between Israel on one side and the other countries on the other side, that Israel will accept to talk about the free zone even the peace is not achieved. And other countries, as far as the discussion is continuing, do not pressure Israel to sign up to the NPT, because that should be the results of the conference rather than beginning of the conference. Has that kind of discussion been taken place, or nobody has talked about it?
Christopher, and I see you at the back. I've got you down. Not now. After Christopher. Great.
Christopher Watson, British Pugwash. I'd like to follow up on what you've just been saying, because I think that one of the real issues, and I think that the sense of disappointment that I've sensed around all the discussion today about the failure to achieve the conference so far, reflects a sense that of frustration that what seems to be such an obvious development, which has been supported by so many people for so long, has somehow not got there. And I suspect that part of the answer is indeed the Israel part, as to say that nobody believes that any time soon is that problem going to get solved, and any fudge in which Israel is allowed to keep its nuclear weapons but is nevertheless part of the zone is a fudge and is a nonsense. The other thing is the impact on public opinion of all that's been going on in the Middle East in the last few months, and the awareness that, to coin a phrase from my distinguished colleague next door, that wars of mass destruction are quite as important as weapons of mass destruction, and that to deal radically with weapons without dealing with the wars that can continue without those weapons is to address what is only part of the problem.
Thank you. Elena Sokova.
Thank you. I have Yelena Sokova, the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. I have a comment regarding the verification developments, the techniques and everything. I think it is very important to continue the work with developing various verification mechanisms. But in the end, it is all boils down to the political will to achieve an agreement and then develop. There are many examples in the history, both in the verification of dismantlement of the South African, for example, nuclear program. You take the US-Russian arms control agreements. Once you make a decision to move ahead, you can work out the details. That is not to say we should not continue and focus on that, but the political will is the most important part of the process, in my view. But I do have a couple of questions to the facilitator team and the others related to some of the ideas that were broached earlier on using maybe a simulation to see how we can work through some of these issues, and inviting other individuals who are maybe not in their government positions currently and can play the role, so that you can really realistically assess what could that process be and where it could move forward. I know this idea was even presented to the facilitator team at some point and entertained, and I wanted to hear whether there is any progress with it. And the second question also regards to, you mentioned that there are, in part of the consultations in the region with the states, the team also has consultations with various regional organizations. I obviously understand the Arab League is one of them, but you use the plural, so I wondered what are the other regional organizations that are part of the discussion.
I should say this is the last question. I'm sorry for those of you who want to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. There were a lot of... my name is Polina Sinovets. I'm from Ukraine, Odessa National University, and I have a couple of remarks and questions in this connection. So there were a lot of comments before speaking about Israel and Israel's position and the necessity to perform the pressure towards Israel to start the process of nuclear disarmament. But I would like to ask that, of course, maybe there is a certain strategy towards the promotion of the WMD-free zone in the Middle East. And so in this connection, is there any kind of idea how to, first of all, how to persuade Israel to do something with its nuclear weapons concerning the fact that there is no possibility to start this dialogue without the recognition of Israel by its neighbors? Then maybe it's worth to start making the pressure over the neighbors of Israel to recognize Israel, and then, well, so what is the place of Arab-Israeli peaceful resolution in this whole strategy of the creation of WMD-free zone in the Middle East? And is there any kind of strategy in this whole strategy how to deal with this issue? Because I believe that this is one of the the biggest problems and biggest obstacles in the creation of the WMD-free zone in the Middle East. This situation over the non-recognition of Israel and Israel's position towards other states in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to return now to our speakers who have a few minutes to wrap up. Hannu, I'm going to turn to you first because I'm cruel like that.
By all means, thank you. Well, I many of the speakers, I think, presented mostly comments. there were some questions, and one counter comment I would like to make is that we are speaking about a conference which would discuss the establishment of a zone free not only on nuclear weapons but all categories of weapons of mass destruction, which of course brings some more difficulty to the task, not only the task of the conference but to the task of convening the conference. The main avenue in going to the conference is of course the dialogue between the regional partners, the dialogue and agreement on the arrangements for the conference. The question about the regional organizations other than League of Arab States, I may have by accident used plural there. League of Arab States is certainly the most important regional organization we are having contacts with. Simulation techniques, I know that many institutions have actually had this kind of exercises. We have been informed of the results, and of course it's quite interesting and important technique, but nevertheless it cannot compensate for the direct contacts between the states of between the governments of the regional states. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hassan.
Yes. Yes, I think the idea of the idea of a zone loses much of its charm if it's just directed at one country. I don't think this should be the objective. I think we're talking about Israel, but we're talking about future Israels. We're talking about future Iraqs, Iran. Any kind of proliferation. I think some form of rule-based, norm-based regional order that applies equally to everybody. I think that's what should be the objective. And I think the WMD idea provides a kind of like a package where that can be traded, where nuclear, chemical, and biological can be traded to provide benefits for everybody. I agree with you, Elena, on the importance of political will. It's really important. Verification does not solve everything. But I think we need to be ready once political will is there, that we have the capacities, the capabilities to verify things and move things forward. The idea about arms control and whether it prevents war or not is something that has been debated for ages. But I think we can just, at the moment, agree that if we can just prevent war, let's try to limit its destructive potential. And these are very indiscriminate weapons that deserve to be banned. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mustafa.
Oops. Okay, two very quick points. One on the connection between conventional forces and nuclear weapon-free zone issue. Professor Thomas from Sweden, subscribed to this idea. Back in the early 80s, the Soviet Union proposed a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Balkans. Turkey, which has long supported the idea of nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East, objected the idea of nuclear weapon-free zone in the Balkans because of the imbalances in the conventional capabilities of NATO and the Warsaw Pact. And NATO, and that was also the time the Soviets pledged no first use, and NATO never accepted that because NATO could not win a war without resorting to nuclear weapons if necessary. Second, on the issue of how to convince Israel, very simple, recognize Israel. I'm a Turkish scholar, and I'm saying, because I'm looking at the facts on the ground, and so long as there are countries or non-state actors in the region which are aiming at destroying a country, the security analysts, politicians, decision makers of that country will, of course, want to hold on to most powerful weapons. So if there is something like nuclear weapon-free zone on the agenda, something very important but very, very difficult to achieve. But one of the first steps, not the only step, of course, one of the first steps must be to recognize the state of Israel and its right to exist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we close, I wanted to just give a few reflections on the discussion. One of the things that I've been quite aware of, I'm sure many people in the room have been as well, is that we've had a lot of discussion about Israel, its weapons capabilities, but there's been no Israeli voice in the room. And I think it's really important that we make sure that we have understood that and that we factor that into our discussions. The second thing is, I think that if we think back to 1 year ago, and we listen to the Director General from the OPCW talk about what happened 1 year ago in Syria, where we had use of weapons of mass destruction, where we had the United States and Russia collaborating in the context of something that they completely disagreed on. That was how to address the Syrian civil war. Nonetheless, they were able to find collaboration over weapons of mass destruction and what to do about it to great success. Can we see that still being the case today? And Mustafa has raised that point as well in his presentation. So we are in a very different situation today than we were a year ago, and that we were in 2010. The world has shifted on from 2010. And so one of my reflections is that, a week is a long time in politics. 5 years is a near eternity in politics. And so much has changed since 2010 that what I fear now, and I think this is what Christopher was also putting his finger on in terms of his mentioning the frustration, what I fear now is that the parties involved are poised to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, that they have a historic opportunity to create something that is very special, that is better than what is now, that is not perfect, that will involve compromise, what negotiation doesn't, and does require and demand visionary leadership. And what I think we are all fearing from our various perspectives is that we will look back, that if this opportunity isn't taken, be it the end of this year or the week before the NPT 2015, if this opportunity isn't taken, that we will look back in 20 years and regret it, bitterly regret it. We have been worried about chemical weapons going missing, being taken up by non-government forces. We ought to be worrying too about nuclear weapons and perhaps other types of weapons going missing in those situations. I think we can see from the turbulence that we're seeing in various regions at the moment that we should not be complacent about any of this. So this is, I think, something we need to think about. We need to project ourselves into the future. And I'm going to end with the very unfair question, and I apologize my mood, that I posed to you. But I'm going to end, and I'm going to ask everybody in the room this question, is what would you do now if you were the facilitator? Thanks for that very constructive comment. And I think, if we put ourselves in the position right now of the facilitator who's been trying to get everyone to the table, find ways to just get people to talk in order to be able to bring about a conference that will be the gateway into delivering a WMD-free zone in the Middle East. The question he has in his mind is, what does he do now? How does he make that happen? And what can we all do to help him? And I think, Hannu, you are going to be in the coffee break and you're going to take everybody's answers to that question, I hope. So, yes, and we heard from Angela as well about the Secretary General's passion about this issue, and the co-conveners, I agree, and all the players, all of the countries involved in the discussions. But I think that as the facilitator, he is mandated with facilitating this. So what can he do? Because I think that we all know is that if this doesn't happen, the first thing is that there'll be all sorts of fingers of blame being pointed around. The most significant thing is the people of the region will not benefit. And I think critical thing for me is to put the people at the centre of our decision making. So if you're passionate about this, what do you do to make it happen? What compromises are we prepared to accept in this process? And are we prepared to let it go? These are the big questions. And that's what's focusing the mind and increasing this frustration that we're hearing. And on that happy note, I will close the session, and I want to close it by thanking our three speakers who made excellent presentations, joined in the debate, came up with really helpful and constructive points. I'd also like to thank all of you here for listening, participating, posing really tough questions, getting into an interactive discussion. And I hope that at the next EU Non-Proliferation Network, we'll all be celebrating the beginning of a process that will lead us towards the WMD-free zone in the Middle East. So thank you all very much.